How's it going, everybody? Brad Kelly here, NFL analyst at the Slant Route. We're going to talk about some 2021 NFL Draft wide receiver pro comparisons today. Make sure you subscribe to this channel using the button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Something about these pro comparisons, they're based on a lot of different factors: body type, athleticism, skill set, projected NFL success. So I don't do a pro comparison for every wide receiver prospect because sometimes it can be a little bit forced. And instead of doing that, I would rather try to make something very realistic for each player. First one we're going to talk about is Jamar Chase to Justin Blackmon. Now, I broke down Jamar Chase and his skill set in a previous video. You can make sure you can check that out. I'm going to put that at the very end of this video as well. I'll put the link in. When I compare him to Justin Blackmon, if you remember Blackmon on the field, he was about 6'1", just under 210 pounds, extremely strong in his route running and after the catch, could really win on those slant routes and vertical routes, and was very successful his rookie season with Jacksonville. Now, he had a bunch of issues off the field that prevented him from having a long career in the NFL, but I think Jamar Chase is going to be everything that we thought we were going to get with Justin Blackmon if his off the field was in better shape. So that is a compliment because Justin Blackmon was well on his way to being, a top 15, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. And if you remember his season at Oklahoma State, his last two seasons at Oklahoma State, I think Jamar Chase's college tape looks very similar to that. Next one, Devonta Smith to Keenan McCardell. For those of you who don't remember Keenan McCardell, he's 32nd all-time in receiving yards among wide receivers. There are three tight ends ahead of him too, so he's 35th all-time. An undersized player, about 6 foot, under 190 pounds coming out of college, but one that was fearless over the middle, was a very nuanced, detailed route runner, could really operate in the middle of the field, the intermediate level. When he got to Jacksonville, which is a second team in the NFL, he paired with Jimmy Smith to form one of the best wide receiver duos in the history of the NFL. I think Devonta Smith has a very similar game because they get open. He's a three-level route runner. He gets open constantly, and he's very smooth and fluid after the catch, very similar to the way McCardell was. If we're looking back on Devonta Smith's career and he has over 11,000 yards in a very long career, I think that's a really successful career for Devonta Smith. That is a comparison that if you don't remember McCardell, you might not understand, but his production was very high in Jacksonville. Yeah, he averaged over 1,000 yards a year and about 5 touchdowns during his 6 seasons with the Jaguars. Next one's going to be Jaylen Waddle to T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton's a 4'3" wide receiver coming out of college. He had 8,000 receiving yards in his first 7 seasons in the NFL and only missed 1 game as a rookie in those first 7 seasons. Now, the last 2 years, he's had some injuries, hasn't been quite as effective. But if you remember T.Y. Hilton with Andrew Luck, he was one of the best vertical wide receivers in the NFL, one of the most feared vertical wide receivers in the NFL. And Jaylen Waddle has a very similar skill set in the sense that he's listed as the same exact height and weight. His route running starts with his vertical game, and then everything else is based off of it. I think Hilton is a little bit more smooth and fluid through breaks, while Waddle can kind of explode through them a little bit better because his technique is a little bit different. He really tries to drive and dig into those breaks. But other than that, we're talking about players who are the same body type, have the same type of athleticism in a straight line. And I think production-wise, I see Waddle as a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. So his production could be very similar to that of T.Y. Hilton as well. And I think Hilton was kind of an underrated yards after catch receiver in his first 6 to 7 years in his career, an underrated part of his game because a lot of times there was the vertical stuff or along the sideline on the boundary, and then we have the chances to showcase it. But when he did have those opportunities, I thought it was very, very effective after the catch, which is a strength of Jaylen Waddle. The next one's going to be Rashod Bateman to Corey Davis. Now, Corey Davis coming off his best season in the NFL, just missed out on 1,000 yards, played in 14 games. A player who early on there was, potential bust in Corey Davis. But what we saw of him recently is what I think we're going to get out of Rashod Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota, a good size receiver. Bateman's about 6'2", listed at 210 pounds. Corey Davis was 6'3", 209, coming out of Western Michigan University. a boundary wide receiver who I think has good footwork on the outside, is going to get open, not a huge separation guy, not necessarily the Chris Olave, Elijah Moore, Jaylen Waddle, Devonta Smith type of separation, but for a bigger boundary wide receiver, I think it's very solid. Because he has that refined footwork. He can run through double moves, a lot like we saw out of Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans this season. I think Minnesota's offense as well, especially in 2019, was a lot of play action based stuff and allowing Rashod Bateman to kind of take extra time in his stem and use those double moves and use an extra move when necessary. And that was really what I think propelled Corey Davis to have his best season with the Titans this year, is when they're more kind of play action based offense and allowing him to really maneuver in those stems. Next one is Kadarius Toney to Randall Cobb. Kadarius Toney, very kind of joystick wide receiver, can cut in all angles, really explosive mover, but is really special with the ball in his hands because of that balance. Because he's balanced through contact, he's really flexible, he's fluid, and that's something that we saw out of Randall Cobb, especially early in his career. If you remember Randall Cobb, his second year in the NFL, he led the league in all-purpose yards because he was a kick returner, he was a punt returner, had over 100 rushing yards, and then was also the wide receiver. Both of them win inside on those slant routes. They use that speed to win on slant routes. Kadarius Toney is a fast player, but he's probably not going to be that low 4.3 type of guy. He has gotten run down in the open field before. He's kind of, I think, in that high 4.3, low 4.4 range, which is where Randall Cobb was as well. A few years into Cobb's career, he actually had 91 receptions for over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. If we're talking about that as a ceiling for Kadarius Toney, I think that's one that makes a lot of sense because he's also going to be used on those horizontal motions to stress and stretch the defense. He's going to be using the return game. I think overall you look at their skill sets and it's a very similar one. Toney, like I said, has those kind of special joystick type of cuts that are rarely seen. And really we only saw him from Cobb early in his career, not so much in the last few years. Next one we're going to talk about is Chris Olave to Adam Thielen. Now, Adam Thielen doesn't have these dominating physical traits like a guy like Julio Jones, but he has produced at that high level before, getting all-pro honors in 2017. The first thing that sticks out of Chris Olave's film is his footwork. He's just silky smooth. He mixes his pace really well. He can move side to side, laterally, very agile. But he's also able to separate down the field and kind of snap those curls and comebacks off. He might have the best curl comeback stop route combination of any prospect in this NFL draft. And that's something that is also true of Adam Thielen. He runs a fantastic stop route, can get loose down the field because of that footwork and the way he mixes his stems. Chris Olave was a track athlete, so he actually might run a little bit better than Adam Thielen, who was in the high 4.4s. But when you look at Thielen's his three-cone drill, his pro agility, and those agility tests, they were really good. And I think Olave is going to have very similar times in that area. I think Olave coming into this draft class is going to be a potentially late first-round pick. And if he has a career similar to Adam Thielen's, in the last 5 or 6 years, I think that would be a win for Chris Olave. Next one's going to be Elijah Moore to Jeremy Curley. Jeremy Curley came in with the New York Jets, was a very effective slot receiver, undersized, was sub 190 pounds, similar to Elijah Moore. Really, his game was based on separation. And for those who don't remember Curley, he was very effective, and he was a dangerous player in that slot, especially after the catch and over the middle. And that's kind of where Elijah Moore is going to live in the NFL. He's definitely a full-time slot receiver, in my opinion, has barely really ever taken reps along the boundary at Ole Miss, but his game is based on separation, and that's where Jeremy Curley thrived. That's where Elijah Moore is going to thrive as well, especially when he's able to work against linebackers or safeties or a type of rolled coverage. Elijah Moore can really eat, but he's also has that kind of just like fearless, physical type of game for a smaller receiver that gives slot corners problems. And Curley was the same way with his time with the Jets and the San Francisco 49ers. Last one we're going to talk about here is Sage Surratt out of Wake Forest. He opted out of the 2020 college football season to better prepare himself for the NFL draft. I'm going to compare him to Michael Floyd. Coming out of Notre Dame to the Arizona Cardinals, Michael Floyd was definitely a boundary wide receiver, was a high pick, was drafted in the first round. And his game was really goes and slants. And that's kind of where Sage Surratt is right now. Surratt has a really nice stop route as well, but his his separation is not really going to exist. It's more of jump balls down the field, quarterback that trusts his 6'3", pushing 220-pound wide receiver to go up and get it. And Surratt is very good at that, similar to the way Michael Floyd was. His ability to be physical, win across space on those slant routes or those stop routes, create separation using his hands at the top of the route, something Michael Floyd found a lot of success on. But the separation was never really there. And part of that was due to a lack of straight line speed. Good athletes, pretty fluid for their size, but not a burner. And teams could kind of crowd them at the line of scrimmage and prevent them from separating. Now, Michael Floyd, multiple 800 back-to-back, I believe, 800-yard seasons. I think Surratt's going to be right in that range as well. He's going to be a top 2 or top 3 wide receiver for whichever NFL team drafts him and put him along the boundary. Just don't expect that high level of separation. A quarterback that's willing to throw some contested balls to his guy is going to his top guys, is going to get the most production out of Sage Surratt from Wake Forest. Let me know what you think about these comparisons. I also put them on Twitter in a tweet. You can find me on there at BradKelly17. Drop them in the comments. Give some explanation about why you agree or disagree, or players that you like. Remember, we're talking about body type similarities, athleticism similarities, skill set similarities, and a reasonable or realistic career success. Not necessarily production, but success. And that's where a guy like Justin Blackmon comparison is actually seen as a compliment and not as a degrading type of downgrade on a guy like Jamar Chase. Thank you guys for watching.